This podcast is part of the Batman Universe Podcast Network, hosted by the BatmanUniverse.net. Check out everything related to Batman and the entire Bat family at the BatmanUniverse.net, including news and original content related to comics, movies, television, merchandise, video games, and more. Also, check out some of the other unique podcasts that TBU has to offer. Consider supporting this podcast by becoming a patron on Patreon. Even $1 can go a long way in supporting this content that you enjoy. Look for a link over at the BatmanUniverse.net to offer your support now. And now, on with the show.
In 2008, a podcast was created with one goal: to bring Bat fans around the world news related to movies, comics, video games, television, merchandise, and so much more. And now, the Batman Universe Podcast has returned.
Hello everyone and welcome to the latest episode of the TBU Podcast. We have another special TBU interview this time around. Scott is talking with a group of people this time instead of a single person, specifically Lenny Schwartz, who is a playwright and director of an upcoming play, which is called Bill Finger, Rise of the Bat. So you'll be hearing a lot more about that. Rick Stafford, who is known as the True Aquaman. So they'll be talking about cosplay, Aquaman. And then they're also talking with Athena Finger, who is the granddaughter of Bill Finger, the co-creator of Batman, and the heiress of the Dark Knight. So this is a really packed, it's a really packed interview. There's a bunch of different things that they're going to discuss, specifically Bill Finger's legacy, the upcoming play, cosplay, comics, mental health, and of course, favorite Batman of all of the interviewees. So sit back and join us as we listen to the latest TBU interview on the Batman Universe Podcast. Take it away, Scott.
Hi, this is Scott with the Batman Universe Podcast, and today we have quite the episode. Joining me is playwright and director Lenny Schwartz, heiress to the Dark Knight and granddaughter of Bill Finger, the creator of Batman, Athena Finger, and international cosplay icon, fitness coach, and the true Aquaman, Rick Stafford. Today we're talking about a new play that's debuting in Rhode Island at the Rise Playhouse on September 22nd and opening at the Chain Theater in New York on October 3rd. It's called Bill Finger, Rise of the Bat, and it explores the life of Batman creator Bill Finger. You can find details and links below. First question, let's start at the inception of this play. How did it start and how did it come together?
Well, for me, I mean, I guess I could start. It's kind of a long story. I said this in another interview recently. I had heard the name Bill Finger in the 90s. Oh, actually, 89 is when I first heard the name Bill Finger. I was working at a comic book store, and there was this talk about how Bob Kane, because the book, what's the word I'm looking for now? His autobiography. It's been a long day. So, as you can tell, it's my 14 hours hour I've been teaching. So yeah, his autobiography was out, Batman and Me. And the people at the comic store were talking about it and saying, and I never heard anything, and every Batman comic's always, Batman written by, created by Bob Kane. And they told me the story of Bill Finger, and it stuck with me. And so it just, over the years, I became a writer and I was writing plays, and I always wrote goofy comedies. I never thought that I'd be writing anything with Batman related or anything. I thought, if anything, to keep me away from Batman would be the thing. And then I would just write comedies. And back in 2011, I'd written a play about Buster Keaton. And it was a wonderful biography play that we had wonderful actors on. And then I just, it was one of those things. I'd start writing these biographical plays. I'd written one about Charles Schultz and did some other ones. And literally one day I was at San Diego Comic-Con, true story. I was supposed to go somewhere. I was supposed to have a meeting. And I got turned around. And my wife says, well, go this way. And I literally bumped into Athena, not like bumped into her. I literally bumped into her. And that's a true story. and I was talking and like something hit in my head. I said, it was just when with me, ideas kind of pop up out of nowhere. And I said, hey, have you ever thought about a play about, about Bill Finger, your grandfather? And she said, she was very gracious, very sweet. And I still have the picture. He said, yeah, sure. And, it's very, a lot of times, you kind of like these ideas pop in, and I kind of popped in the back of my head. And 8 years later, here we are. It's really weird. It's been a really weird and interesting journey, but I think that's from my perspective of things. That's where, sorry, I rambled for a second, but that's the full story of how it began for me, at least. Hi, Athena.
I sparked some creativity for you. It's great.
Yeah. And the funny thing is, it's been an interesting journey. Because, and it's been so cool because when you write these things, I consider Athena a lifelong friend, and I love Athena. I love Rick. I think they're both great people, and they're wonderful people. So it's kind of this really, really interesting thing that happens with this one, because a lot of times when I was writing these plays beforehand, I'd be coming in later. So most of Buster Keaton's family has dissipated. I'd written a play about the Marx Brothers, and the family is kind of like, it's just kind of like in the wind. There's no one really alive who was really like with Groucho during those time periods. With Athena, it's kind of like, here's a great resource and somebody who you can talk to and reach out to, and then it just turns out she's very cool as well. So it's been really nice, actually. And was the first time I did a biography of someone who was alive, and someone from the family, had some direct involvement with the play, which was great. And I will say that I've done other versions of it, and the reasons why I really been kind of holding off and doing like a kind of like rewriting is because this is the first play of mine that I actually have to say that I felt like when we did it, it wasn't where it should be, where I was comfortable with what it was. And I put the original up in 2015. I had this idea that I'd be doing it again in a year and rewriting it. It's the first play that I basically gutted and just kept rewriting. I think I think it was like the final count for versions of play was 2,342 versions of the play. And
wow.
of some sort of script. Yeah, I usually don't get that much. Usually it's like 6. But it's so. I have probably about 5 working versions of the script that could play in a play script form that could really work. And I have one where they don't even create Batman to the last page. And I have so many different versions of it and so many different ways. There's definitely like thousands of different pages. So rather than, put myself in a straitjacket, I'm going to direct a play. And that was the choice. Which I'm happy with this one.
It's kind of funny the way you describe, all the different versions of the play and everything. It reminds me when you said you had all these crazy amounts of drafts. It made me think of Shakespeare, where they always talk about how his play, there were all these different copies floating around and traveling around that were all workable in, some form or another. But
yeah, the hard thing with doing something like this is with doing something like Buster Keaton or doing something like the Marx Brothers. I even did a play about Lucille Ball, but you can see them in interviews. You can see them on screen. You can see them see them do something. Just actually act out, get some intonations on their voices, get some ideas of who they were, and there's footage out there. Even Charles Schultz, you can see, when I did that play, you can see, how he spoke and how he, you kind of, gets things, you can kind of derive things from that. With Bill Finger, he's a writer, and writers, they're not on screen and not doing anything else. The only thing I had to go off of was, and which was basically in the last 4 years, was the original New York Comic Con that he was at. And that's the only thing I had to go off of for his voice to kind of try to get into his head and kind of get in things. So a lot of it was just guesswork. And a lot of it, when you're writing, especially for someone who doesn't have those things down, is a guesswork that sometimes doesn't work. So, I think Athena's probably sat through about 5 or 6 or 7 different script readings, and maybe more, and maybe about 100 different versions of it. She probably has so much paper. If she ever printed it out, she'd be killing it in the entire state of Florida. But yeah, it's so for me. It was kind of trying to get that right. And I think the big thing for me when I finally hit it was, and I think when it finally happened, I said this before, was was right before the pandemic. On March, I think it was 7th or 8th, I had finished the draft of the script, and I finally figured it out. I'm like, oh my God, I figured out what it is. We can finally put the show up. And then the pandemic happens. And I'm like, oh my God, it'll be done in a few months. And then 2 years later, I actually had a theater picked out that was ready to go in October of 2020. And then then the theater closed down. So because of all these things. And so trying to get all these elements together, it was, but I will say when I finally see the rehearsals and the cast that I have now, I wish I had them from the beginning. Cause I think if they saw the initial script, they all would have said, we're not doing this. So, because if they had the script back in 2015, these are very smart actors. I can't put one past them, directing wise. They're very, very smart people. And when I look at the original script, when we did the first play, and please stop me if I'm babbling. When we did the original version of the play, it wasn't the actors that were having the problem, but the issue is that I'm watching it. I look back at reading it, and so we're watching it, and Bob Kane's consistently evil in that script. And the thing I always tell myself is that, when I watch him, like, well, why would Bill Finger ever work for somebody like this? He just go back to selling shoes. And why would anyone do that? And so making those discoveries of who these people actually are, even Bob Kane to make him into a fully rounded character was to me very important. So I'll shut up and then can ask some more questions, Scott. Thank you.
No worries. That makes total sense.
You're a storyteller.
I'm very passionate about this.
No, I'm on the edge of my seat here, so no worries. Like it's fascinating to hear. Athena, you're credited with the story. Did you have, how much guidance did you provide with the play, or details or notes or?
Well, I did see the play that was put on back in 2015. I liked what he started with. Obviously, it needed work. As he said, he didn't feel like the script was really up to par, up to his standards, up to the family standards. There were some things that really kind of were off. But again, they're just so little, especially back in 2015 and before that, so little information about Bill out there that was available to people. Even myself, I never met my grandfather, so I didn't get to know what his personality was. So I had to learn from other people. And so I had to share what I learned with Lenny to kind of give him some of those little nuances that we didn't really know.
Yeah.
You don't have the interviews. You don't have them interacting with people. You don't have people like myself who actually knew him. Unfortunately, my father passed away, when I was 16. So he's not around to ask questions about. So it was very complex trying to figure out how to really portray the story in an accurate way, but still make it entertaining because we don't want it to be a snooze fest.
Right.
So it was tricky. And I think that with every rewrite that we worked on, we got a little more of what we were trying to achieve with the portrayal of all the characters. Because like Lenny was saying, Bob Kane wasn't always a villain. He kind of grew into that character by his own doing, but that's not where he started. He really did start trying to present an opportunity to these people, artists and writers, a chance to do their craft. And, there weren't that many opportunities out there. So I think that part of Bob's character was kind of missing. There were some dynamics between my father and Bill that were just a little off. But there's, again, such little information, you kind of have to just go with your gut.
Yeah.
Analyze it a little bit. So, I mean, I think that, again, every time we went through it and tweaked it, it just became better and better. So I'm excited to see it on the stage.
Yeah. Oh, I'm sorry to interrupt. I was going to say, without Athena, the ending of this play, which is my favorite scene I ever have written in my life, wouldn't exist. And I mean that from my heart. It is my favorite scene of anything I've ever written. And the favorite thing I've ever directed, actually. And it's what it always should have been. And I will say, without that and without her sister Alethia, yeah.
Yes.
Absolutely.
Alethia had a lot to do with it too. I mean, she sat down with Lenny and the cast several times to hash this stuff out. I was in another part of the country. I live in Florida and they're up in Providence. So I did what I could. I would come up and participate when I could and things like that. So my sister really did put her heart and soul into this project.
She really did. The biggest contribution that Alethia gave me was she said to me one day, she goes, she is so her sister's should be a story editor. That's what she should be doing. Honestly, I've worked with like people like that. She should be in Hollywood or just in like doing theater and being a story editor. She had said something to me, and I thought it was one of the most amazing notes I've ever gotten too. She said, "You know what's amazing is that this comic was invented when during the World War II era, like 1930s." She says, when Batman was created, you should think about being Jewish, being that mindset, how this influenced the comics that came out of that, like Superman and Batman especially too, and how that relates. And it opened up a whole new boom like that. It was brilliant. Like, she's absolutely brilliant. So that really put the script as far as like subtext, a lot of subtext, a lot of the atmosphere that wasn't there initially. Yeah, very much so.
No, and that's great to hear. It's beautiful too, like the passion that everyone has for the project. It's like just listening to it, like I could feel that energy. It's awesome. And and like keeping those things in mind, I feel like a lot of times with comics, and when we talk about like the origins or the creation of it, it's something we don't a lot of people aren't cognizantly thinking about. And even mentioning when you guys were talking about how little information there was available about Bill Finger, I think honestly, prior to that documentary on Hulu, Batman and Bill, anything I heard was relegated to Comic-Cons, and it was kind of like hushed whisper or murmurs. It was almost like a secret handshake that some people would, mention here or there, but it wasn't very, prevalent at all, and obviously for anyone listening who hasn't seen that documentary, they should watch it and check it out. It's very good. And you'll learn a lot, but, and obviously the long, history of, people fighting to, your family, fighting to put, Bill Finger's name alongside, Bob Kane's as a creator of Batman. And so it is really great to hear, the passion and putting all that stuff back in there, because I feel like the more we learn about a lot of these origins, you're right. There's a lot of like subtext there and things going on at the time and, culture that kind of gets interwoven into this, that kind of gets lost into like the pop culture, aspect of it.
Very much so. I also was something that I'm glad that Rick is here, because I know it's something that he does, who very much talks about. It's kind of along the same lines, in the same wheelhouse that he does. Is he does something I think that's very important. If you don't mind me saying this, Rick, that you do, you talk about mental health and cosplay a lot, and I think that's very important. That's something that, and believe it or not, Athena. When I met Athena initially, I didn't never knew Rick ever existed.
Neither did I.
Yeah, we didn't. It's amazing. Welcome, Rick. And so we didn't know. I mean, and the thing that I saw, and this is not to say it had an influence on the script, but I think it's very important what he does. I think that mental health and what happens in comics and cosplay is so important. And so, especially what he does. I thought about that very much heavily when I was writing this version, these versions of the script. And I'm not saying that this is that's what was going on during Bob Kane, but with Bob Kane and Bill Finger. But you've got to think about what Bill's mental health would have been like, or what the mental health of someone living in that time period would be like. And how does somebody get by? Even if they're like, you start seeing Batman becoming this kind of iconic thing, and it's something that's really interesting if you think about it. That Bill Finger, someone said this, I think it was Travis Langley. He says that Denny O'Neil told him that Bill Finger, I'm paraphrasing completely, said he didn't just create Batman, but he helped create the language of comic books. And imagine seeing that going on, in front of you. And that to me, it's something to really to acknowledge and to think about, this is a guy who basically did that. He invented that. He did, all these creations, not just Batman, but other creations. And I'm sure Athena could probably go through, list through, 100 creations just on one thing. But that's, talking about that and talking about, someone who couldn't even get health benefits. That's the mental health of where we are now and what we know about mental health is so different than what it is back then. So I wanted to kind of, explore that, not to say, we're going to, not to say we're going to really, go into an examination of that, but it is something to bring out. What does it feel like to, one day realize, no one's talking about that you're the creator of, that you're the, that you created Batman. You're one of the people who created Batman. You think about that and how does it affect somebody? And that was what I think what really opened that to me. And how do you do that honestly? How do you do that in a way that's honest, that doesn't feel like you're pushing it? And there was a lot of dialogue and experimentation. It's kind of like saying, okay, what does that look like without making it pandering? So for me, that was very important to kind of research and kind of look into. And luckily, I have a very, 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 very strong actor playing Bill. He just, Athena sent the picture over. He cut his hair to look like the picture Athena sent over. He's real. He looks. He walks on stage, and it's amazing. That he just studied he studied every picture that's out there. And I'm like, my God,
there's so few, unfortunately.
Yeah, I know there's so few. He took it to heart, and he's like, he actually went on an exploration of if I wore my hair like this, and I'm like, oh my God, and did things like that. It's really an important thing. But to bring it back to where it is, that's why I'm really glad Rick's on the call too, because I do think that is some in theater and film, and even in very much in comic books and cosplay. I think that's something that is very important to talk about. Again, I'm not going to be standing on a platform with it and saying this is the play we're going to. But it is, if you don't put that in your play and realize that as a writer nowadays, I don't think you're doing your job. And that's how I feel. It's just, to me, it's very interesting. So there is some exploration of what that looked like back in the 60s. So that was, back in the 50s, 40s, and think about where we were as a society. I hope that makes sense. So, yeah. So thank you, Rick.
And just to kind of reiterate why he says that is, well, I'm a licensed occupational therapy practitioner. So I work with both pediatric and geriatric patients. So I have a medical background where I deal with people's mental, physical independence.
Okay. Wow. Yeah, it's a whole nother side there. And how long have you been doing that?
About 4 years.
Okay. Hold on one second. Threw me off there. When you were talking, Lenny, I hopped through my notes. I have a couple pages here, and I was hopping around. In terms of what Lenny's talking about, in terms of working with the mental health aspects. What are some things you do or see regularly that that you encounter that you help with or work people through with?
Well, one of the things I do a lot of times at conventions is I'm a motivational speaker. So I'll actually get up and I'll tell the story. I do a very personal story, a traumatic story in my own life. I lost my son at age 8 to leukemia. And he's actually the reason I got into the cosplay world in the first place. And I won't go into the whole story, but it was Star Wars based, and and that just kind of meandered into one aspect of being a hero. And I've been called the hero with 1,000 faces, like Campbell. And so I've been through the hero journey, and I've gone the whole hero arc that way. And so I like to get up and talk to cosplayers and talk to people at conventions about how trauma doesn't have to define you. Trauma can cause you to do things greater than yourself. It can make you a better person. And so when people think, I was picked on, or I'm this or that, this happened to me, like, well, that's sad, but why did that stop you? And so I work very hard toward bringing people out of their shell and saying, look, you can be a 400-pound fan of Batman and want to dress up like Batman. That's not going to stop you. Do it. Go out there and be the best Batman you can be. If you have a fandom, use it as your therapy. Cosplay is kind of my therapy. I use it to, I get to be somebody that makes people smile. I can't bring joy to my son anymore, so I bring it to other people and their kids.
That's a great, like a mission statement almost there. And so that's, but what you're getting at, like, I feel like, so many people in the community, echo that and feel that, and, probably, greatly appreciate that. I feel like, some of the people I've talked to lately too, that's also, very true. And if I may say so too, there was a documentary where you spoke a little bit more to that. It was called Heart of an Empire, correct?
Correct. Yeah, okay. That was how I basically got involved with the Star Wars universe, and yeah. So, and that, like I said, that's a whole nother rabbit hole as far as getting involved with Lucasfilm, LucasArts, and all the different cool experiences I got to have along with the Star Wars world.
When it comes to Aquaman, I know for now, you go by the True Aquaman, and you have some really cool costumes. Like I saw your armored one at the San Diego Comic-Con. I thought was really, that thing was phenomenal.
Oh, thank you. Yeah.
Do you, first off, I hear you swim every day.
I do. In fact, I was out swimming about 5:00 this morning in a lake here in Florida.
Wow. that's dedication. Where did your love of Aquaman come from? Like, how did it start?
Ooh, okay. Full disclosure, Aquaman was not something I wanted to be. It was something that came to me in a very unexpected way. As I said, I started in the Star Wars universe. I was hanging out with a bunch of people who broke away from that organization to do their own thing. And then they got into doing comic book characters, and they started with Marvel. And so this whole group, we did Marvel characters. And so I was a Iron Man triathlete at the time. And so an Iron Man had just come out. And so I found a suit. It's 85-pound full resin armored suit. And so I was an Iron Man who wore Iron Man. And the helmet doesn't have all the cool electronics in it and all that. So it was just a solid suit of armor. And I loved it. I mean, everyone just thought it was the greatest thing. So then after a while, the people in the group decided, hey, let's go to DC characters. And they're like, oh, I'm Batman. I'll be Wonder Woman. I'll be Green Lantern. I'll be Flash. You should be Aquaman. And I'm like, I don't want to be Aquaman. Nobody likes Aquaman. Everyone thinks, he's kind of a joke. Everyone thinks he's a joke because at the time, and again, this is in the early 2000s. It was the Justice League version, or the Super Friends. I'm sorry, the Super Friends version that everyone was relating to. And it took them a good 6 or 7 months to finally convince me to put on the orange and green. And so I had a friend of mine who worked at SeaWorld. She was a costume maker for the performers. So she made me a full water usable costume. And I started walking around, and I got exactly what I thought. Hey, fish stick. Hey, look, it's Mermaid Man from SpongeBob. It's like, no, I'm Aquaman. Or, it'd be like, hey, Batman, Wonder Woman, Superman, get in there for a photo. And yeah, Aquaman, if you want to get in there too. And it's like, that's not cool. I put on that Iron Man suit. Everyone just, I get a queue line set up. Now as Aquaman, I'm a B string. I'm a bench warmer to the holy trinity of Batman, Wonder Woman, Superman. So lo and behold, I continued to be as professional as I could, and I was leaving a convention here in Orlando called MegaCon, and I was helping a friend out who had epilepsy, taking her back to her room because her husband was working a charity booth for comic book artists that needed health care. So we were raising money for people like, that would have been like, Bill Finger and, George Perez was there and a bunch of other people were there. So as I'm leaving, I get stopped by this old lady who says, hey, my husband would like a photo with you. Sure, no problem. So I tell my friend to just kind of wait for a moment. I walk over to this frail old man and I'm doing my hero poses. And she's got one of these Kodak disposable cameras. So they'll click, click. And I don't know if the photo ever turned out, but as I left to go away from the old man, he grabbed me and he goes, you're just as I imagined you would look. And I said, well, thank you, sir. I appreciate that. I go to walk away again. He grabs me a second time. He goes, no. You're the living embodiment of my imagination. And I appreciate what I see. Again, thank you so much. I go to walk away a third time. He grabs me. Now he's an old man. I could take him if I had to. Because you get some interesting fans sometimes. And he goes, son, you don't know who I am, do you? I said, no, sir, I don't. And he goes, I'm Nick Carty. I'm the inventor of the Silver Age Aquaman, and you truly are the Aquaman I imagined. And that's how I got the name. The True Aquaman was from Nick Carty. And so, once you get the blessing of, the guy who created the Silver Age version of Aquaman, I mean, that's just pretty much the stamp of approval. So from that point forward, I said, all right, if it's a creator or one of the creating team guys thinks I'm Aquaman, then sure enough, I'll be Aquaman. Yeah. It just kind of spiraled from there. So that's my True Aquaman origin story.
Wow. I mean, that's
amazing.
Yeah, that's an incredible origin story. I don't think anyone can top that. So
and the reason he was there was he was getting ready to do a panel about the Silver Age of the comic book world with George Perez. Stan Lee was there at MegaCon, and so it's him, Stan Lee, George Perez, several other major comic book artists were getting ready, and he was on his way to that panel when he saw me and stopped me and told me that. And I actually have in my collection a signed, not by him at that time, but I do have a signed one of his covers, and I also have a statue that was in his estate, and it's signed to his, I think it's his niece. It's signed to on the bottom, so I actually have a signature on one of these sculptures based on the character that I portray.
Wow, it's pretty awesome. Do you have any, favorite Aquaman stories or incarnations?
Oh, as far as I currently have 13 variations of the Aquaman, and some are unique. Some are. One of my favorite stories is the New 52 Aquaman, and I know I'm going to massacre his name because I always do. His name is Paul Pettinger. He's got a very difficult last name. He's the artist for the New 52. And so when the New 52 came out, people were like, "Oh, man, you look just like the New 52 Aquaman." And I said, "Well, I play Aquaman. He draws Aquaman. Of course, I'm going to look like him. I mean, that's who I portray." And like, no. Some of the poses that you do at conventions look very similar to the images that are in the comics. Well, I do Aquaman poses, of course. So I completely blew it off. Well, the artist was in a small convention here in Florida, down in the Melbourne area, and I decided, okay, I'm going to make the trek down there, about hour and a half away. So I show up. I'm in my New 52 Aquaman. And I see him, he's sitting there and he's sketching away. And I stand in front of his table, got my trident. and he realizes somebody's in front of him, and he looks up, and the look of recognition just clicks, and he's like, "You're the dude. You're the dude I've been using as a reference." So he gave me this huge centerpiece of one of his comic book artworks, and I have that framed on the wall. You know, he signed a trident that I had at the time. He signed a water bottle, an Aquaman water bottle. He said, and then we were at what was it, Heroes Con, Athena, up in the Carolinas. No, it wasn't Hero.
I think it was at GalaxyCon.
GalaxyCon. Yeah. So he was there again, and this time I was in my armor, and I gave him a cover, and I said, "Hey, you want to do a cover for me?" And so he took some photos of me in my armor and drew me up in the armor. And when I went to pick it up, he goes, "Don't ever ask me to do it again. That armor had too much detail. That was a killer project." So I got a bunch of his stuff in my house because apparently I was the reference for that. And then apparently I became the reference for the Injustice 1 and Injustice 2 video game as well, unbeknownst to me.
Huh.
Yeah. And then I wound up being on an international merchandise list from China. I wound up being on merchandise. They made shower curtains about me and blankets with my image on it, and we're selling those internationally.
Oh my gosh. I want a Rick Stafford shower curtain. That'd be great.
do you have them at home?
I do. I literally
at conventions as his backdrop.
As a backdrop.
And then he used to have the blanket on his bed, but I made him take it off. It was a bit much.
Yeah. Like, one of me is enough. She doesn't need to have three different.
Four. I don't need four.
And then how did you two meet?
You want the story? Or?
This teeny tiny little convention outside of Orlando. I mean, think of like the smallest ballroom you can rent at the smallest hotel you could possibly get in the suburbs of nowhere.
Yeah, you had to leave the vendor hall. Yeah, you had to leave the vendor hall to change your mind.
No, it was a friend of ours, a mutual friend. It was a very small convention. And there weren't a lot of people there. And so we just started chit-chatting. I had never met him before. And I didn't recognize what he was dressed as because he was not dressed as Aquaman.
No, because it was such a small con. Yeah.
The Pip-Boy from
the Fallout mascot. The Pip-Boy.
Awesome.
I could totally see that. Like, you have that look down.
I had the Bolt suit on, real tight Bolt suit. And
and I actually wasn't promoting the Bill Finger story at the time. I'm also an artist, so I was trying to peddle my art. And so, many months later, he put out a call on Facebook for a birthday party for his birthday. And so I asked if I could come up and participate, and the rest is history. We never stopped from there. We went like, okay, let's go to every convention we can go to and go everywhere. It's been pretty cool since.
Well, to be honest, there was a little bit more to it, but
come on, you don't have to tell them that I had to beat you over the head. We don't need to go.
Well, no, technically she bought an annual pass to Universal Studios as an excuse to come up and see me on a regular basis. So she lived in Fort Lauderdale and I live in Orlando, which is about a 3-hour drive distance. And so she would say, "Hey, can I come up and use my annual pass? Would you go with me to Universal?" Sure. So we'd go, have a good day. She'd go home. A few weeks later, she'd call again. "Hey, can I come up?" And then finally, one day we were leaving the park and she about spun me around and goes, "Look, I like Universal, but I'm trying to date you." And so, are we dating or what?
Oblivious.
Sure. Yeah, sure. That sounds like a good idea. And the rest is history.
Nice. Oh, and I mean, you guys, you make a great team.
Oh, thank
So
you.
in the footage I've watched and the Comic-Con footage I saw, recently from, your San Diego adventures. So
We literally drove out and back from San Diego from Florida. So it was over 3 days of driving. And to spend 6 days in a vehicle with somebody and still be friends afterwards says a lot about us.
Yeah.
It's a good test.
It was an acid test.
I'm glad my wife and I took road trips beforehand.
Well, a fun tidbit, and again, this is one of those random tidbits that I found out, is February 8th is Bill Finger's birthday. February 8th is my birthday. So Bill Finger and I both have the same birthday. And then, so Athena is dating somebody who has the same birthday as her grandfather. And not only that, is I'm also a writer. And I've written a whole bunch of stuff. In fact, I'm working with Lenny on a play idea that I'm working on called My Life as a Swimmer. And so just like Bill Finger, I'm a writer as well. So
A lot of connections there.
Yeah,
Wow.
A lot of weird coincidences.
Yeah, no, that's amazing. Yeah, kismet, I think they would call that, right? Yep. One thing I wanted to bring up, since we're on the topic of travel and driving around at San Diego Comic-Con, you guys had a panel where you debuted scenes from the upcoming play.
Yeah.
I wanted to ask about how the fan reaction was.
It was great, actually. It was really great. We were at the 4:00, the last panel on a Sunday, which we got in, and I submitted it. I put together and we put it together, and I wasn't sure what to expect. I had asked my friend Tyler McPhail, who's an amazing moderator, to host it. And I asked him, I said, what do you think? 4:00 on a Sunday. He goes, oh, you'll be fine. Don't worry about it. Right. He's like, just kept telling me, he said, don't worry about it. It'll be fine. And I'm like, oh my God, like what I'm like, it's my first thought is like, this is great. Like, this is amazing. It's like a dream, Second thought was, what if nobody shows up? And, it's kind of a thought. People, I couldn't fathom it, but the room was pretty packed actually. And there was a lot of good responses. People actually bought tickets once we did it, because they were available at that point after seeing the panel. So it went well. I've done panels at other comic conventions, but I thought it went extremely well. My daughter, who's going to be 13, really enjoyed it. So that was my only concern too, that she wouldn't. But she's my biggest critic, So I was happy with it. Yeah.
Good. I mean, that's great to hear. And ticket sales too. I feel like that's kind of the big barometer,
Yeah. Yeah. We've sold some in Rhode Island too. I'm excited. I'm excited to see the people with, people's reactions, I guess would be the thing. But it's, I was pleasantly surprised to see that the reaction to it was very, very good. And what was really great afterwards too was that I get to talk to the people who run the programming department. I said, I told them, I kind of debriefed them and everything. And depending of things, and one of my things, I'm going to send them a thing. And I like to say, if you do something once, you want to make sure you can see if you want to be invited back, and see what you can do. So, I've had these crazy notions of one day doing it at San Diego, the convention, like doing an actual play, because I don't think anyone's ever done it before. So that was one of the things that kind of poked my nose in about. And, and kind of see, after this run of things, what happens from there, and seeing, hey, do you guys have any interest? Because you never know. So I think that would be the next step. And, then to have them get us all hotels and airfare would be great too. But
always the dream. I hear they really jack it up in San Diego when it's convention season. God.
Oh yeah.
So I'm in the Chicagoland area, so I just go to C2E2 every now and then. But I have not
heard
gone.
Wonderful things about that.
Yeah,
I still haven't been there.
It's a fun one. I really like it. It's it's pretty big, but I mean, again, I don't have San Diego Comic-Con as a point of reference, so it's big to me. But from what I hear about San Diego, is like maybe it's small. I don't know.
Yeah,
I don't know. I mean, I like the smaller ones. It's easier to maneuver. You get to talk to more people. You're not spending so much time waiting around or trying to get around and get around people and waiting in line and just things like that. Funny story is San Diego Comic-Con was the second convention I had ever been to in my life.
It was my second too.
A Batman anniversary year in 2014, and that was super intimidating and tons of fun. But I didn't go to conventions growing up. I didn't even read comics growing up. But I wasn't part of the culture. So it was definitely an eye-opener as far as like how awesome the culture is and how the fans really are the ones that are driving the comic industry. And if we don't respect them or even acknowledge them, that we won't have it anymore. It will go away because they won't have that drive behind them to make the comics and the everything. So it was really nice to be able to make that connection, even at an event as large as San Diego. I mean, as Lenny said, that's the first time we met was there in 2014. And we kind of just went from there.
I didn't realize that was your first year, actually. Wow.
Yeah, that was the second convention I've ever been to in my life.
Really? See, I've been going to San Diego since 2008 when you can actually, when I first went to San Diego, I walked in and walked right, actually Stan Lee walked right into me. I turned around and all of a sudden I see a group of people standing next to me. And all of a sudden, this little old man comes right next to me and he says, "Hello, true believer," and whacks me right in the face. Doesn't even notice it. Just hits me right in the eye. And I'm writhing in like pain. And I'm like, oh my God, it's Stan Lee. Just whacked me, right? Because I couldn't believe it. It's a true story. And so then I'm standing there, and then one of his, he leaves, his entourage leaves, and then like a guard comes over and he says, "Stan whacked you in the face, huh?" And I go, "Yeah, he did." He goes, "He does that." True story. And that was my first time in San Diego Comic-Con, my very first day. And I walked over and I look over and there's William Catt with The Greatest American Hero. The funny thing about Stan, it was one of the coolest things in the world. And I'll never wash his face again. The cheek. Anyway, the thing was about when I first went to San Diego was that you could actually, that very first year, there was a little old lady with a little table about maybe about this big, maybe about from side to side, not even bigger than the desk I'm right here. And she was sitting there and she was selling tickets for the following year, and nobody was buying them. Nobody was buying them. It was amazing. You could literally just walk up and get tickets for next year, and you could like when I went the first year, I bought my tickets a week before and I decided to book a plane in 2008 to go, and and then Twilight happened and destroyed the entire convention. I walked into Hall H. I walked into like the Watchmen panel. Frank Miller, you just walk right up to. It was like it was something else. Like, I mean, it was, I remember that convention. I met Neil Adams for the first time, and he was the nicest guy in the world. You could actually sit and talk with him. There was no, but then all of a sudden, Twilight happened. I think in 2009, and that was the last time you could really just walk into Hall H. I walked into the Avatar panel when that was going on, but then in 2010, it really just exploded. And what ended up happening was that, like Athena said, I kind of prefer the smaller conventions sometimes too, because even New York Comic Con, what ends up happening, you'll walk 2 feet, 3 feet, stormtroopers come by, walk again, someone's taking a picture, walk again, so big thing coming by with like a special guest, something else, you keep walking. So trying to get across a convention hall can be very difficult, and you don't really have those meaningful conversations. You still do, but not as meaningful. Rather than, sitting down and actually sitting down. We had a small convention here and Roy Thomas showed up and in Rhode Island last year. And it wasn't very big at all. Maybe about 200 people went. And Roy Thomas took time to talk to every single person. And it was awesome. It was amazing.
Roy is such a nice guy.
He's such a nice guy. Yeah, he is.
Such a sweetheart.
He really is. It was funny because I was actually supposed to write something for him, but then for a Steve Ditko book he was working on, and then Marvel sued the Steve Ditko family. So and Roy was so apologetic, and I'm like, Roy, I would pay you, to do this. It's like, you tell me when, but he is probably one of the nicest guys in comics and totally a legend in my opinion. Just a real, like through and through.
Yes, I agree.
Yeah, but he's a good dude.
Wow. Has Warner Brothers acknowledged the play or said anything about the play, or?
The thing is, the way I write plays, I was very lucky to learn like legal things very early on in my career. Like doing biographical plays. When I was doing the thing I was kind of concerned about was I was always concerned about, them saying, hey, you know what, you can't use this, you can't use this. Luckily, I have an entertainment lawyer who says this is what you can use, which has been great. And I also, when I write, I've gotten very used to when I was working, I was doing the Lucille Ball play, there was a guy working with the Lucille Ball estate. And he called me up and he said, I'm going to teach you something about the business, basically. Does your lead actress resemble Lucille Ball? I'm like, yeah, she does. He's like, think about what you're saying. I'm going to ask you again. Does your lead actress look like Lucille Ball? And I sat there for a second. I go, sir, she looks nothing like her. Nothing at all. He goes, that is the correct answer. And that is how you write biographical material and kind of like, obviously I can't put Batman in the show. I can't have him like running around the stage. I can't have him like fighting, Joker on stage, which I probably wouldn't do anyway. But I can't put, I originally didn't put many nods to Batman with costumes and stuff, but this time I'm just using it with colors and everything. So, I can kind of give a small spoiler. One of my actors dressed up perfectly like the Penguin and, did a character perfectly, sounded just like him. And, but he did it enough so it wasn't the Penguin, but it was so brilliant the way he did it that I can put little things in there and dress people up the way this actor, Jeff White, taught me how to do it. And so the answer is they haven't contacted me and they won't because there's nothing to be contacted about, really. Yeah, I'm not making a cent on the show. I don't plan on it. If everyone wants to do the show afterwards, they can have it. Like I think the best thing I could probably say I won't charge rights on it. I just want to see it done the right way. And actually for Bill to have his name, if you can teach one person in the audience who Bill Finger is, that's an entire world that knows Bill Finger at that point. So if anyone's listening to this and wants to do this play at any time, let me know. It's yours. Just spell my name right. Spell Athena's name right.
Well, and I appreciate that because I feel like it's, it kind of goes back to, everything we've kind of talked about so far on this podcast, from everybody, Rick too, with the cosplay and everything and, and your engagement with the community, it's really kind of, what you're saying is, embodies like the community, helping the community, and inspiring people and serving as, inspiration for everybody to go out and do their thing, whatever that is, if it is, Lenny, you and Rick, you're both writers. I like to write too, so if it's that, Athena with the artwork, whatever it is to like do the thing and share and help lift each other up.
Yeah, I agree. And especially because when we're still in the pandemic, we're coming out of it, which is great. But I also think you need these stories that, I think this is, I was sad when we couldn't do it in 2020, but, maybe it's, I always like to say things happen for a reason. Like you said, serendipity. I think we need these stories. And I think we need stories like Bill Finger too, to show that, because if you really think about, his life, it's so incredible, like what he accomplished, what he did. And if you think about it, he really created something that is going to outlive me. It's going to outlive you. It's probably going to outlive all of us. And how important it is to get his name on that, how important it was in 2015 to have that happen. And have that moment where you just see his name with Bill Finger. and that was the original ending of the show when I first did it. That didn't happen. But what's amazing now is that that's there, and that's a legacy. That's huge. But it's also an incredible thing that says that like Athena was talking about, fandom is people talk about fandom. All this happens because of the fans. There was an outcry of support for Bill Finger. There was an outcry. There is an outcry for mental health. There is an outcry. There is the artist communities that are coming together, and that's a huge thing. And if you think about it, but it all stems back from people like Bill, who really put that construction together, and put those things, put those things in place for people, and that's huge. And that's those are reasons why he cannot be forgotten. And we have to tell that story of what happened. And it's not that I'm not by any means comparing this to to anything else, but it's like anything else. If you stop telling the story of what happened to Bill Finger and how it happened and how it led to his credit, we forget it. And these things happen again. And that is the truth. And we can't forget it. We can't forget the stories. We can't forget that for years that, and if you don't mind me saying, through Athena, growing up, if she almost didn't want to, I'm sure at a certain point, she didn't want to even talk about Batman. Because, that we have to talk about those things. We have to say, hey, you know what? This injustice happened to Bill and it was solved, and this is how it's solved. And it's an incredible story to really hear those things and see those things that happen, the steps that happen to get to where we are today.
Yeah, that was very well put. I don't think I could add anything to it that would make it better or anything. That was perfectly put. Before we're getting close to time, so I'm going to jump to just a couple general questions, and we'll start with. Sure. I have two for the group: favorite Batman stories and favorite Batman incarnations.
Go ahead, guys. I'll start. Let's see. My favorite Batman story would still have to be Kingdom Come, even though it's a Justice League story. My favorite. See, it's tough. I had this conversation at one of the panels out in San Diego, and there's been so many people who have portrayed the character, either live action or with animation. And it's really hard to say who I think is my favorite now. For a long time, I would, without even missing a beat, I would say Michael Keegan. He's still in my top. Like it's there's a lot up there now. And again, I think that he was the first, and he really did bring the realistic part of the character to the fans that wanted to see the character no longer drawn, right? We'd seen the animated shows. We had all the comics up to that point. So he definitely has a significant role. I'm being long-winded. I'm super sorry.
Oh, no, you're fine.
But I mean, there's something special that each person has brought to the character. So we have Michael Keegan as Ty. Let's say he's tied. And right now, I really like what Robert Pattinson did with the character as the younger Batman, being more of a detective, not being just a brute, even though he was a brute also, but he also used his intellect to kind of figure out what was going on.
Being a detective.
My other top one is Ben Affleck, which I don't think he gets enough credit because the movies unfortunately weren't very good. So they like to blame the actors when really he did a great job. It's just
he was amazing. Yeah.
You can't really blame him for that.
Yeah, and I agree. Ben Affleck, in most things I've seen him and he's great. So I don't hold that against him. I'm just,
he's a brilliant actor, and he really brought both sides of the character which is not always easy. I mean, I know there's diehard Christian Bale Batman fans, and that's their Batman. But you know, he was a brute. He used his force throughout all of the movie, pretty much.
Yeah.
You know, and that he didn't really bring the Bruce Wayne side. I mean, he made him really arrogant, and yeah, I mean, he was a spoiled rich kid, but I don't recall any stories where he was like an arrogant little SOB. You know, like, I don't know. I think it's Christian Bale's attitude came out too much when he was doing the other side of the character. I don't know. That's just me.
Yeah. I kind of felt the same way about Christian Bale. I felt he walked off the set of American Psycho into the bat suit.
Right?
I went to go return some videotapes and I came back as Batman, you know?
Don't get me wrong, I really like the Christopher Nolan series. They're amazing movies and they brought a different dynamic to the character. It's just, I think that unfortunately Mr. Bale missed the mark on it.
Rick, do you have a favorite?
I do like the Nolan Batman. I do like the Patterson. So those are my toss-ups. You know, I like both of those have a different gritty feel to them. As far as storyline, I'd have to say the story of the heiress to the Dark Knight storyline, which is actually it's actually a comic I wrote. So yeah, you'll have to wait to see how that plays out. But that's my favorite Batman story, the heiress to the Dark Knight story.
Okay, well, I will look forward to that. Lenny, did you have a favorite you wanted?
All right, so I'm very much like Athena, but I have two really incarnations of Batman in the comics that I love. I love Batman Year One. I think Frank Miller and David Mazzucchelli have a masterpiece there of comic art. It is unbelievable. Mazzucchelli is an amazing. If you just look what they created in those 4 issues, it's unbelievable. It's unprecedented, really, in comics, in my opinion. It really is this beautiful, beautiful, beautiful work. And plus, David Mazzucchelli did teach at RISD, which is down the street. So I love Mazzucchelli in general. Also, in comics, I have to say the Steve Englehart, which doesn't get much love, as much love as it should, in Marshall Rogers series from the 70s. I love that. The Joker with the fish, I just love the Batman stuff. Just unbelievable. If you haven't read it, go read it. It's unbelievable. But the thing I like about every Batman, though, is that there's a Batman for everybody. And I love that. You know, it could be the animated one, the Frank Miller one. It could be, the gritty, the Adam West one. You can enjoy it, and it always works. So that's what's really cool about it. As far as my screen Batmans, I actually really agree with Athena. Michael Keaton had the impossible task of really creating this character from whole cloth, basically, and he did it. It's unbelievable. He was my favorite Batman. I agree with about Christian Bale. Obviously, I think he is talented, but I do think the arrogance comes through so strong that it's you don't root for him so much. It's funny because you watch The Dark Knight and you're rooting for Heath Ledger at a certain point.
Oh, I'm rooting for Heath all the way.
I literally was rooting for him. You're like, oh God, I hope he destroys Gotham, man. The pencil trick. I'm like, it's all right. We'll let him go with that. Kind of making excuses. But I agree. It's like, and I really thought that at a certain point, maybe it was a documentary for him. I don't know, but it didn't hit the mark for Christian Bale.
Yeah.
I will say though, the Robert Pattinson one, and I will say for this, I thought it was tremendous, and people were complaining that he's in the bat suit pretty much the entire time, and that he didn't have much of a Bruce Wayne character, and I disagree with that. He actually broke my heart in that film. He, if you watch the scenes he's in, there's a scene where I think it's the church or whatever. He saves the little boy. That whole sequence he does without words, and it broke my heart. You just watch him and what he's gone through. They didn't feel the need to explain. We all know how Batman became, how Bruce Wayne became Batman. That just put in our heads of what he went through without explaining it. I thought that was so great, and I'm really excited that they didn't they didn't with the Warner Brothers dropping all the films and everything they're doing and everything like that. I'm really glad to keep it the Matt Reeves version because I really feel there's some more stuff to be mined from that. And I think it only will get better. I think, that movie took forever to come out. It did, but when it came out, they really put him through his paces. And I've watched it 3 times, and every time I see something new, and I love that version so much. I feel it only can get better. And I will say the Joaquin Phoenix Joker is phenomenal too. I really feel strongly he had an impossible task as well. He did it, and it's a real impossible task to follow in Heath Ledger's shoes like that. And he did in a different way, and he did his own thing. So I'm excited about the Joker too as well. I think people are complaining it's going to be a musical, but you know what? See the movie
could be
first.
Interesting. We don't know until we know. I feel like a lot of times, people talking about Michael Keaton, I remember reading about all the articles that came out, like, oh, not this guy, this comedic actor.
Yeah.
And then, it's like the defining Batman for a lot of people. Well, myself, included, because I was born in '87. So same
thing about Robert Pattinson. I mean, he was known as the glittery vampire most of his career, and I've never seen any of the Twilight movies. Okay, and so people would ask me, "What do you think of the glittery vampire being Batman?" And I'm like, "I don't know what you're talking about because I don't know him from that. I know him from his smaller independent films." He's a pretty serious actor, and it's he's not one to kind of like put on the bottom of the list here. So I'm curious to see what he's going to do with the character because he hated being the vampire. That wasn't who he was. So I mean, I feel that. I feel like if you watch Cosmopolis, we watch Good Time, the movie Good Time. Oh my God, he's so good in that movie. And I agree with Athena, though. I really am glad to give Affleck a little more of a chance. Because I do think, and I'm not saying take away Patterson at all, but I really feel Ben Affleck did get the short end of the stick because he did. I mean, myself, I was like, Ben Affleck, he's going to do this. I'm like, but you watch him and he had it down, and it was completely different from everybody else, completely different. And it was really intriguing. Like, say what you will about Batman versus Superman, that first hour as Bruce Wayne, oh my God, he's unbelievable. So I agree 100% with that. But Patterson, I think I can't wait to the next film, and I can't wait to the next Joker film. They're both wonderful.
And on that, where can we find you guys, or where can our listeners find you guys? Rick, do you want to take it away?
I'm on Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter. You can just put my name in, Athena Finger, and I should come up. And that's where I'm at. You can see my artwork there. If you want to hit me up and say hi, I'll most likely say hi back. Don't be a creeper. That's all I ask.
Right.
No, I love the fans. I really do. And I like to, acknowledge the fans, like I say, because it's so important that we respect them and honor them. Because, again, we wouldn't be talking about this if we didn't have the fans.
All right. So for people who are looking for me, they can find me under the True Aquaman on Instagram. True Aquaman is the fan page on Facebook, or find me under my personal page under Rick Stafford, and then under Twitter, it's the King Aquaman.
I'm on Facebook under Leonard Xavier Robert Schwartz, not my real name, but that's what I'm under. You can find, if you want to Google what that means, go ahead. It's a long story behind that, which I won't get into. You can find me on Instagram under Lenny Schwartz, or I think it's LNNY Schwartz. And I'm on Twitter, but I never go on. Yes, or just come by my house. I'll cook you some dinner, whatever you want.
This sounds like a good plan.
Yeah, come on by. I did have somebody come by once. It's a long story, but I won't get into that tonight.
All right. Well, Bill Finger, Rise of the Bat, again, opens at the Rise Playhouse September 22nd and at the Chain Theater, New York on October 3rd. Details, as I mentioned earlier, are listed below, and I'll have all your handles from everybody listed as well. From the Batman universe and everybody listening, thank you all for joining us. And, it's been a real pleasure. So just want to say very happy to have you here and looking forward to the play and hope it goes well and, gets packed room to room.
Thank you.
Or seat to seat.
Well, thank you for having me. It was a pleasure.
Great pleasure. Thank you so much.
Thanks so much, Scott.
All right, so that was an awesome interview. Great job, Scott, and thank you to Lenny Schwartz, Athena Finger, and Rick Stafford for joining us for the Batman Universe podcast. As mentioned by Scott, there are details for the upcoming play in the description. You guys can take a look at that. In addition to that, there's all kinds of other things to look forward to when it comes to the Batman Universe podcast. We have some more interviews planned. We have some more topics that we're going to be discussing here in the immediate future. So be sure to join us by subscribing to the podcast if you are already not subscribed. Also, be sure to check out our website, thebatmanuniverse.net, for all kinds of content, news, originals, and other podcasts that relate back to Batman, including things related to movies, TV, merchandise, video games, comics, and everything else related to the Bat fandom. You can follow us on social media. We are on Twitter, Facebook, Instagram, Discord. We are on YouTube. You can check out all of our social links over on the websites at the top of the page. If you are so inclined, please consider supporting us. To make it simple, just head over to the batmanuniverse.net, scroll towards the bottom. There's a big banner that says support TBU, and you'll find out all kinds of different ways on how to support TBU. With all that being said, again, thank you so much for listening to this episode of the Batman Universe podcast. For Scott and myself, we will see you guys next time.